South Korea had to act.
An operation such as the one the UDT, or the South Korean UDT SEALs carried out, is very complex. It requires intel, it requires assumed risk, it requires execution on a nearly perfect level.
Just before dawn on January 21st, the UDT saw their opportunity and made their move. Using small, fast boats, the Korean team hit the freighter like a typhoon.
For the ROK Navy SEALs, to fight the pirates and rescue the hostages is like fighting through a 15-story building that's made of steel with steel doors laid on its side. They would be fighting from compartment to compartment, having to work their way, cut their way, blast their way through the doors as the pirates tried to hold off their attackers.
If you can imagine taking down a target, which you've never been before, you don't know where the bad guys are, and you're clearing this systematically, leaning on the training that you've done in the past and relying on your teammates to watch your back, it's a very complex operation, and there's a great deal of risk involved.
The 5-hour siege ended with the killing of 8 pirates, capturing of 5 more, and the freeing of all 21 crew members. 3 UDT operators were injured in the op, but in the end, they all survived.
The Korean UDT SEALs are a highly seasoned, effective unit. They've proven time and time again to be effective at deterring and handling some of these relatively volatile situations that pop up.
Whether it's hostage rescue or taking out a high-priority target, the best way to successfully carry out a mission is by any means necessary.
Essentially, through unconventional warfare, you're trying not to have a fair fight. You're trying to stack all the odds in your favor.
One tool that Special Operations Forces commonly use to make this happen is the standard issue flashbang. This non-lethal grenade, sometimes known as a stun grenade, emits a deafening sound and blinding flash of light when detonated. The temporary effects can even go so far as to disturb the fluid of the inner ear, causing loss of balance. Delta Force uses the M84, a flashbang that's specially designed with a lesser blast effect to minimize collateral damage.
Delta Force is also a component of JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command.
Where the U.S. SEALs represent the Navy, Delta is the land-based Tier 1 unit of the Army. Delta's primary function is counter-terrorism and direct action missions such as hostage rescues.
A typical hostage rescue operation that Delta participated in during the Iraq War occurred in 2004 in Ramadi. 5 contractors, foreigners, had been captured by the insurgent forces, who executed one of them. But exactly where they were kept and who was keeping them and how many people were guarding them was initially unknown.
Most Tier 1 groups are heavily trained for hostage rescue. It's all about knowing your specific job, trusting your team, and practice. Lots and lots of practice. With excellent intel provided by Polish forces, the hostages' location was pinpointed to a remote house, and Delta sent out on their daring mission.
Once the hostages' location was fixed, Delta, with support of its organic aviation unit, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, would have conducted a templated hostage rescue operation.
Delta came in by Black Hawk, fast and furious. By flying low to the ground, the thundering blades of the copters wouldn't be heard until they were right on top of their target. With seconds to prevent the loss of lives, Delta stormed the house from all directions.
If you had been on the raid, you would have fought your way into the building, clearing each room, employing all your training and target discrimination to ensure that you kill the insurgents, but you don't kill the hostages, but making sure that you treated them as if they might still be a threat in case any of the insurgents were playing hostage in order to escape the attack.
Once on the ground, the entire mission was over in a matter of minutes. The 4 remaining hostages were rescued, and the kidnappers had no idea what hit them. Thanks to specific training that only Tier 1 units experience, Delta was able to do their job with sharp precision. One of the lesser-known Special Operations Forces in the world is the Canadian JTF-2.
Canadian Task Force 2 teams are a secret organisation, particularly counter-terrorist, They're there for the defence of Canadian government, to be used very much as in a counter-terrorist role.
The recent rush to valuable natural resources in the north has given Canada a reason to discourage troublemakers from crossing their borders. No one wants a run-in with a highly trained JTF-2 Arctic unit.
The JTF-2 was responsible for providing security for the Vancouver Olympics. You know, Olympics are watched around the world. They're a high-stakes event where a country can't afford to have something go wrong. The terrorist activity in the 1972 Munich Games set the stage for Tier 1 Spec Ops forces to be a part of future Olympic events.
Canada has gone to great lengths to keep the JTF-2 out of the public eye. Secrecy is extremely important to all special operations forces and a reason for some operators to remain anonymous. When it comes to modern weapons, perhaps no gun has changed the way wars are fought on the ground than the sniper rifle.
Just the fact that the enemy know we have snipers out there is a deterrent, will oftentimes make them take different routes or not conduct an operation altogether.
In 2009, the U.S. Navy SEALs ended a long, tense hostage situation off the coast of Somalia. In the blink of an eye, 3 pirates lay dead. The captive was free, thanks to the SEALs' highly skilled sharpshooters. One of the most popular modern sniper rifles is the Macmillan TAC-50. This manually operated bolt-action rifle is revered for its reliability and accuracy. The TAC-50 has set several distance shooting records in the past and is still the sniper of choice for many police and military forces around the globe. The basic element that separates a special operator from a conventional soldier is the type of training. Special operations forces training is often long and brutal. Every country's training and selection process is different, but the one quality all operators seem to share is the innate will to handle severely extreme scenarios.
When I got to SEAL training, I was a deer in the headlights, and I vividly remember the first day thinking to myself at the end of it, like, what the hell did I just get myself into? But you know, you adapt. If you want it enough, you can kind of overcome obstacles like that.
Pass rates for Special Air Service selection are close to 10%. SAS training is very, very hard. The selection phase takes 6 months.
They're looking for the hardest guys they can find, the guys that won't quit. Surprisingly, though, the physicality isn't always what kills guys. It's the mental aspect of it. And I think most guys would agree that the mental side of the selection course is what determines if you're going to make it or not.
There is one particular form of merciless training that all operatives dread. It has many names. Some call it resistance to interrogation, or RTI.
Every Spec Ops soldier has training for if they're captured. They need some type of basic defense to not let too much of the pertinent information get into the wrong hands.
Trainees are often deprived of sleep for several days and put through a series of intense interrogations. These exercises are not about enduring forms of torture. It's more of a psychological game where you learn what not to say. While the exact details of what goes on during RTI are not discussed, it sounds extremely unpleasant.
The graduates discover that the expert interrogators that are training them know how to reach down into the very core of their being and find their deepest personal weaknesses.
Ask any operator from around the world, and they may tell you that their training is the toughest. But there is one country's force that has a legendary reputation. Russia's special purpose forces, known as Spetsnaz, grew from within the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Historically, the Spetsnaz fell under Russian military intelligence, but today the term Spetsnaz is largely an umbrella term for any Russian special purpose military. Spetsnaz have been known to specialize in working behind enemy lines, often embedding themselves in civilian populations in order to commit sabotage or just general chaos.
I met one guy, one of the mujahid, people who fighting against Russian army, and I say about Spetsnaz, what do you think from your point of view? And he say, look, Russian soldiers were not very good. One airborne troop better than 10 orderly soldiers, but one Spetsnaz is much better than 10 airborne troop.
Spetsnaz had a reputation for being very effective and very hard.
Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the role of the Spetsnaz on the world stage has diminished. But at the peak of their history, there was no other special operations force more respected and feared. Stories of their ferocious training were a Cold War staple. But they were not just stories. Spetsnaz candidates were forced to confront their worst fears, no matter how dark. If candidates had claustrophobia, for example.
There is a new recruit, and immediately there is a psychologist who somehow, very easy, he can find your phobia. Imagine most terrible situation what can happen with you. They put the people in a coffin, put in a grave, and close the grave. You're inside of coffin, you see, so you don't know, for 10 minutes you're in a coffin, for 5 minutes.
And if you had a fear of blood,
There is a slaughterhouse next door, you see, so why not to make one bath of blood? Why not to jump into that blood? It is such a nice thing. Come on, boys.
such training creates an elite brand of warrior, fearing nothing, not even death.
There is a Mother Russia, and you died because you protect your father, your mother. You died, and they always glorifying. It was no such a unit as a kamikaze unit, but glorification of suicidal act always in our history was so important.
Once training is complete, Spetsnaz was sometimes asked to prove themselves in unimaginable ways. Prospective recruits were dressed in local prison uniforms. Their task was to cross the city of Moscow in 24 hours. Meanwhile, a police report had been made about escaped convicts.
It is a real order. And we don't know what can happen, because policemen can shoot you. So 24 hours to cross Moscow from A to B, it is quite tough.
They put a lot of emphasis on exotic training, their own form of martial arts, the use of small shovels to be able to throw them like a hatchet and kill a man.
Spetsnaz love it because it's such a universal thing, you see, so you can dig it, you can use, you see, so when you're in the water, and as a weapon, you see, so just like that. There's a wonderful sound when spade is, you see, so shook. I love it.
They build a huge mythology around their training. It looks good. The people who are Spetsnaz soldiers are very, very tough soldiers.
But a lot of this has to do with the image that they want to present to the larger world.
It is important for reputation of Spetsnaz. People know, you see, so that guy, he will fight up to end. He will never surrender, and for him it's much better to blow up himself and everybody around him. So people, because they know that, they try to avoid contact with such guys.